Well, I hung out with a couple of guys who are pretty close to retirement. One is 69, one is 70 years old. They're both kind of working a little bit, and they're both kind of retired a little bit. And as I spent the weekend with those guys, they wanted to know one thing: Randy, where do I put my money? Because all these interest rates are going up. I heard that. I know that there's probably some places out there where I should put my money. We had a discussion about CDs. We had a discussion about annuities. We had a discussion about all sorts of different things. But they really want to know specifically where to put their money, where's the best place. So, Greg, can you break that down? I mean, we've got this new category that we can use now as retirement savers. What's the difference between putting your money in a CD and an annuity? Is there one that's better than the other?
I think it's always dangerous saying the word better, right?
Okay.
They're different, and I think they're very similar in a lot of ways too, which makes it kind of neat to have more conservative retirement-friendly options, which we didn't have 2 years ago, right? I mean, having some interest rates that have gone up and may go up even more makes it kind of nice, where people can really be comfortable with a 5 or 6% return. That fixed. I mean, that feels pretty good. And when we start breaking it down, let's just go through the mechanics of a CD. A certificate deposit sold by a bank is quite simply, and almost everyone knows what it is, but let's just make sure everyone understands. You're basically giving them a chunk of money for a set period of time in exchange for a set return that's fixed. So, hey, if I give you, $100,000 for a 5-year CD, you'll give me 4.8% every year. At the end of every year, you get a tax bill for the interest, whether it be accumulating quarterly, monthly, annually. Usually CDs, it kind of depends, but how it's being accumulated obviously affects the returns. But at the end of the day, you're paying tax at the end of the year of any interest earned on that CD. And most CDs have no access, meaning that you can't take it out during that time period, or you forfeit the interest, or you forfeit a portion of the interest. Everything has different penalties, but you really have to kind of put that money away and forget about it. And that's a CD. And a lot of times people like the idea of giving money to their local bank. They like the idea of keeping their money in the community, and that's great, right? You have your community banks, your credit unions, maybe your local branch banks, whatever that case may be. Those are all great reasons to use a CD, particularly with the newer interest rates. But then people ask about annuities, and they're trying to figure out, well, what's the difference between a CD and annuity? And they're like, well, my CD, and annuity are the same rates. Why wouldn't I just pick the CD because it's local and I can get it? And that's a great question. We get it all the time. And we say, well, let's just break down how the annuity works, and then you can kind of make your own decisions. The way annuities work are very similar in the sense that a lot of times you can have a fixed annuity or a fixed index annuity. The difference is the fixed annuity operates just like a CD. Hey, I want 4 or 5% for a set period of time, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Obviously, longer the time period, usually higher the interest rate. If you give them your money longer, they're willing to pay you more. That's kind of the give and take of any financial instrument. Same with bonds, right? Like the longer that you're going to commit to giving them your dollars so they can use your capital, the higher the returns. And if you don't need that money, you should consider kind of the ins and outs of what that means for you. Now, whether it be a fixed that obviously is going to be a set percentage. A fixed index has a floating component, meaning a fixed index annuity will float with the market, and it has a bunch of different markets you can track, or indices, if you will. And it'll go up to the point where it's capped, and a lot of times there's participation caps or cap rates, or performance triggers. There's all kinds of fun terminology they use, but at the end of the day, it's capped. So you can't get the full upside, but it also caps the downside, where fixed index annuities don't go less than zero. So that means your money never goes backwards. So people like that component, where hey, I can get a little bit more than a CD or a fixed rate, but my money could go to zero. If the market goes backwards, I just get 0% that year, which a lot of people like that consistency, knowing that I'm not going to ever go backwards with this chunk of money. Now, that's how they work from a pay standpoint, but annuities are a little bit different than from CDs in how you have access. So unlike CDs, almost every annuity, whether it be annuity or fixed annuity, will let you take roughly 10% out a year without penalty. So that's a nice kicker, right? Most people don't ever use it, but it's nice to know it's there. I always feel like that's kind of a comfort level, where if I put $500,000 in annuity, if I want to take out $50,000 for something any year, I don't have to worry about losing my interest or paying a penalty, yep. Blah blah blah. And that's a nice to have, especially for the longer products. If you have a 10-year product, you take out $50,000 every year, and that's kind of a nice bell and whistle. But I think the thing that gets looked over the most, Randy, and the most confusing part of it, but probably the most important part, is that annuities, unlike CDs, grow tax deferred, not taxable. which means that money every year that you gained on your interest rates gets added to your principal and keeps growing, and you don't pay tax on it until you pull it out. And the reason that's so powerful is that if you had, I would say $100,000 CD over the course of retirement that pays roughly 5%, over the course of 20 or 30 years, you're going to win, actually gain about another $100,000
Wow.
of gain because you're getting interest on interest every year. And that just grows, it just adds up. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot year in, year out. But remember, you're paying tax every year on your CD, where this annuity is growing tax deferred. And it keeps growing and growing and growing until you decide to take it out. And then when you take it out, you have to pay tax on it. But by that time, you've already got the benefit of letting it work for you for 10, 15, 20 years. So the tax deferred nature of an annuity is a huge advantage from a tax perspective that many times gets looked over. So when people are weighing their options, it shouldn't just be about rates, and that's all it usually seems to be about. With people like, well, I can get 4.5 here. My banker said they can get me 5, and it's like, well, but that's taxable every year, and that's a hard thing for people to get their hands around. So the discussion shouldn't start and end with what percentage it is. They also can't take any out. You have no access to it. So that's another component. So it's not just about comparing interest versus interest, annuity versus CD. There's also the accessibility that annuities provide, and also the tax deferred nature of the growth on your interest that annuities can provide. And when you put all those things together and weigh them against each other, then you can make a really informed decision on whether you should use a CD or annuity.